In this demo, we'll have a look at containers in Kubernetes. I have an elevated Windows PowerShell prompt open here on my Windows 10 professional machine. And we also have Minikube installed. So we'll begin by starting the cluster. So we'll type Minikube start and we'll specify the VM driver as Hyper-V. I'll press enter and that will start up our cluster. Now if we go over to Hyper-V Manager, we'll see that Minikube here lists as running, but it's setting up the cluster. So even though that VM is running, it's setting up the cluster. So while it's setting up the cluster, I'm going to go over to my text editor and show you the README for this video. This includes all the commands that we're going to use here. So if you want to reference that, that will be included in the folder for this video. Let's go back over to PowerShell. Now to start an elevated PowerShell prompt, if you've got it pinned to the taskbar like I do, just right-click on it and select Run as Administrator. Okay, so the cluster is up and running. Let's clear this by typing CLS, pressing Enter. And now we should be able to access the command line interface kubecontrol. So we'll type kubecontrol version. And there's the version information. I'm going to clear the screen after every command so that we can see the entire output each time. So now we should be able to get the nodes running on this machine. And there will be one node because this is Minikube. So we'll type kubectl get nodes. Now note that you can also specify get NO. It's an abbreviation for nodes. And there we see our Minikube node. Let's clear this again by typing CLS and pressing enter. Now the image property of a container is supporting the same syntax as the Docker command, and that includes private registries as well as tags. Keep in mind this, that pods are the atomic unit using Kubernetes. So when we create a deployment on Kubernetes, that deployment actually creates a pod with containers inside them, as opposed to Docker where you create containers directly. Each pod is linked to the node where it's scheduled and remains there until termination. In case of a node failure, identical pods are scheduled to run on other nodes in the cluster. And again, because we're using Minikube, we have a single cluster here. So we're just keeping it simple. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to run a deployment by specifying a Docker image. Let's go over to the text editor again. So this is the command we're going to run here. So this creates a deployment based on the Docker Nginx latest image. So let's just highlight that and then we'll right click and select copy. Let's go back over to PowerShell. We'll paste that in and press enter. Okay, so it tells us that the deployment my-nginx was created. So let's clear this by typing CLS and pressing enter again. Now if we type kubecontrol get deployments, then we should see our deployment. So kubectl get deployments. Now we can also abbreviate this as deploy. So kubecontrol get deploy, press enter, and there you see our deployment. Let's clear the screen once more. Now we should be able to get the pods as well. So kubectl get pods, which can also be abbreviated PO. Okay, and there we see our pod. So there's the name of the pod. We see that the desired state is 1 and 1 is ready. The status is running. So let's copy this while we're here. Okay, so let's clear the screen now. And we can interactively start a session on the container itself. So we'll type kubectl exec-it, and the pod name we have to specify here. So let's right click, and that is the pod name that we copied earlier. And what we're going to do is we're going to execute this command. We're going to open an interactive bash session. So you can see now we're interactively working with that container. Okay, so now let's run apt-get update. And we're doing this because as soon as this is done, we're going to clear the screen again. We're going to clear, actually, because we're on the container. And we'll type apt-get install curl. At the prompt, we'll type Y and press enter. Okay, so now let's clear that again by typing clear and pressing enter. And now we should be able to do a CURL and specify localhost and get the default Nginx splash screen. So we'll type CURL localhost, and there you see the splash screen. So now let's exit from our interactive session. And now we're back in PowerShell, so we can type CLS now and press enter to clear that. So now what we can do is we can expose the service by typing kubectl expose deployment, and again we can abbreviate that as deploy, and the name of our deployment is my-nginx, and we'll specify -- type, and for this we have to specify node port. Okay, and it tells us that my-nginx is now exposed. So let's clear this again, CLS, and press enter. And now we can hit the service endpoint directly by typing minikube service my-nginx. So let's do that. We'll type minikube service my-nginx, and that should open in the default browser. And there we see the splash screen for my-nginx.